Hi, everybody. Welcome to Reader's Corner. I'm Elizabeth,
I'm Tess.
and we are here to talk about a spooky read called Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, and it is exciting times. So, normally, Reader's Corner is a book discussion, which is always fun times. They are all chosen because they are available to you on Hoopla immediately right now. Also, sometimes on Overdrive, but you can go get the book right now, and we choose them based on whatever we feel like, and we talk about a different genre every single week, month, every single time we do this. And this option is adult, dark fantasy, and mystery. We have a cat who has joined us.
What's his name?
This is Ragu. She is
Hey,
a black cat
Ragu.
to go with the spooky theme. Hello, Ragu.
Perfect. You planned it this way.
I did. I planned it. I planned to have a small fuzzy visitor. Ragu, can you tell us what makes a dark fantasy or mystery? Does it involve black cats? Okay, not necessarily, but a lot of the times it involves sort of, I guess I'd say it involves like the darker sort of magic. So like with your regular heroic fantasy, you know that you're on the side of like a good character who has like the upstanding moral values. And you know that you have like the swords, the sorcery, the good kind of magic that is like full of wonder and delight. And then dark fantasy mystery, sometimes magic is not the best thing or a good thing. And
Right.
then I don't feel like it exclusively includes ghosts and that kind of thing, but I do see it turning up more frequently than other
Sometimes
times.
ghosts are benevolent and like in Harry Potter,
Like in Harry
the good
Potter, that's
ghosts.
true.
I wouldn't call them dark, but in this one they were definitely dark.
When they're definitely dark. So I guess that is a better way of explaining it, because like ghosts are a thing that can be in fantasy or can't. Either way, just like they can be in mystery or they can't. And like how Harry Potter ghosts are thoroughly decent, well, not people. Then the ghosts in this one are very thoroughly not decent, not people, at
Mhm.
least some of the time. So it was fun because I finished watching Bly Manor, Haunting of Bly Manor and Haunting of Hill House on Netflix like 2 weeks before reading this book. And the approach to the ghost is very similar in both.
Oh
So
yeah.
similar vibes.
Also, like not all like I know this is not a spoiler, but the ghost can inhabit Alex because she has a
Mhm.
certain power that she can share with them. But it wasn't a nice thing. It wasn't like, let's go do this together. It was like,
Rainbows. No.
no, it was not pleasant.
Yeah, it's and that's actually an idea that the book plays with that we should talk about in a minute. Like the idea of, look, it's the wonderful magic versus no, a ghost just shoved me into a case full of drinks. It's not actually great. Um, so for this book, it is about Galaxy or Alex Stern, which, all right, Galaxy, solid name, understand the nickname. She's a member of Yale's freshman class, but she never really graduated. She never did any of those things to get her into Yale. She has been recruited into Yale because she can see ghosties. She was raised in Los Angeles hinterlands by a hippie mom, dropped out of school early, and landed in a world of shady drug dealer boyfriends, dead-end jobs, and much worse. And by age 20, she is the sole survivor of a horrific unsolved multiple homicide. And on her hospital bed, she is offered a second chance serving one of Yale's top secret societies with occult
Magical
activities.
societies.
Magical societies, occult societies,
Hmm.
um, societies with ghosts. So that's fun.
And
And
they
then,
need her because she's the only one that can see the ghosts without taking a magic potion.
right, which if you're sitting there going, magic potion sounds lovely. Actually, it's not lovely. Like, it is
No,
very undelicious and not healthy
painful.
and not good for your liver. That is mentioned specifically that it's bad for your
Yeah,
liver. And I'm like, okay, this is not a good time for anyone involved.
no.
So
And don't think like all the magic in this book is bad. Like the time traveling or like the portals that they do, or they get to go places. Like they do some fun magic.
they do. We should talk about that in the likes and dislikes too, because it's like this huge theme in the book where there's these two different worlds, these two different visions of what it means to be like a person and what it means to have privilege and what it means like what magic even looks like. Because you have, it's not quite a deuteragonist, but you do have the two narrators, and you have Galaxy or Alex, who is very much on team, I would like all of this magic to stop happening around me immediately, please. And then you have Darlington, who is the guy character in this book, and the guy narrator, and is very much on team. Magic is full of wonder, and I have worked very hard to access this world that has all of these hidden possibilities and all of these wonders available for access. And so you get to see like sort of both of those perspectives as the book goes on, which is nifty.
Yeah, I do like that dual perspective.
Had you read any of Leigh Bardugo's stuff before this?
I've read everything by her. I love her.
Everything. Oh my goodness. I have read Six of Crows and its sequel, those two. So I never read into the Grishaverse, but she's written, let's see, she's written the Grishaverse, which is Shadow and Bone, Six of Crows, Language of Thorns, and King of Scars. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books. And then she also wrote Wonder Woman, right? The Warbringer one.
And that is separate. It's a standalone superhero book.
One of the novelizations that they were working on for a while there. So not a comic book, but actual novel. I think we have it in physical copy.
We do.
Of those, which did you like the best? Because I know they are all best-selling and fabulous. Before you read this,
I like the Grishaverse. I like her YA novels. It's interesting to start at the beginning of the Grishaverse and read through it all the way to King of Scars, because you can see how she progresses as an author. She gets better and better and better, which is really cool, I think. Like the first book is not bad, it's just not great. And then you get to the King of Scars and it's like, oh, this is how good.
Okay, that's really cool. I now have to read King of Scars now that you've said that. I'm going to have to go find it.
You need to read the first 3 in the Grishaverse before you read King of Scars.
Gotcha. Okay. I can do that.
Yeah, they're quick. So I really like her as an author. She's very imaginative, very creative, and the way she develops characters and this whole world that they're in is like you just get sucked in. It's very believable.
She does really, and she makes you really care about the characters. I think this is the first time she's played with dark fantasy and mystery. Like I wouldn't describe Grishaverse or Six of Crows or any of that as dark.
No, her YA stuff is not dark at all. I mean, a little.
Well, I did recommend Six of Crows to a friend who was like, Kaz is not a nice person. And I'm like, no, Kaz is not a nice person.
He's not a nice person.
As a collective team, the heroes of that series are heroes. Like, who they're fighting is worse. So I still wouldn't class it, I think, as dark fantasy.
Yeah. This is her first adult novel, and I would definitely say there are trigger warnings. This book is just full of nastiness. If you don't like that kind of thing, this is not the book for you.
Yes, that is a very good point. There is a lot of stuff that goes down. I'm trying to think what sort of trigger warnings to include. Like I know there's a trigger warning for assault, of course, for drug use, for bodily harm, for a lot of stuff, for murder,
a lot of violence.
Yeah, violence. Murder.
Forcing people to do things against their will.
Right, the compulsion, which is separate from the assault entirely. This is a style of magic in the book where they're like, hey, you should do X, and the person has to do it, which is not splendid. So, yeah, warnings for all of those things. Go in a happy little mental place with your happy little blankets or whatever you like to read for the spooky books and the triggering books, and just pace yourself if you're reading it.
Yeah. I will say that I'm not really a fan of super dark graphic things like this, but it just felt like it was right. It was so part of the world that I cringed a little bit, but I wasn't like, oh, I'm done. It was like, oh.
I had trouble getting into it was because that initial chapter, the chapter begins with a particularly violent magical ritual going down. And like I hit that and I was unable to get past it for a minute. But then once I got a little bit further into the book, the thing I enjoyed about it is that Leigh Bardugo, in this book and in Six of Crows, seems to approach the violence and the things that she's writing from a position of like, I don't know, Alex in the book is traumatized and approaches it that way. So it's not like I didn't feel like I was looking at something for shock value or for entertainment value. I thought, okay, we are covering this event, but we're not like going to dwell on it, going to make a big deal of it just for the sensationalism. This is what happened. We're moving on. So
Yeah, you're so right. It did not feel forced just to make it a certain type of book.
right. So that was good. I thought it was treated as respectfully as you could for that kind of thing, which was good. It seems like the internet also likes the book. We've got 4.5 stars on Amazon, 4.05 on Goodreads, and 4.5 on Hoopla. So general likes of the book.
General liked. I did see a lot of mixed reviews on Goodreads. It was either, yes, I loved it, or this was terrible.
Yeah, I saw when I browsed through, I saw a lot of people who were like, I couldn't get into this, didn't finish it. And then a lot of people who were like, this was the best thing ever. So you got both reactions.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it is slow to start. So if you get past the first, get past the 5th chapter, and if you still don't like it, then
I'm gonna abandon it. Pro tip, Hoopla has the audiobook. So just use the audiobook to get past that 5-chapter hump, and then you're good. So as for us, I really did enjoy the book. Like, I liked it. I didn't expect to like it as much as I ended up liking it by the end of the book in those first chapters. But oh my gosh, it was so spooky. It was very spooky, which I enjoyed. Like, I was like sitting there and I'm like, okay, so we're here. There's a magical world. I'm trying to keep up. I don't know what's happening. And they're like, and murder. And I'm like, all right, murder. And so I was very team like Scooby-Doo, putting on my hat, going to figure this out. So I did enjoy that.
I did too. I was on team loved the book. And I think, yeah, when she hit the first murder, it was like, ooh. And then
it sounds terrible, but that's where I was at.
I know, but it was just so interesting. And then there was another one when she teams up with the ghost. And then she wanted to find Darlington. It was like all this stuff. And it wasn't too much. I didn't feel like it was like, oh, there's another thing. It was like, oh, there's more.
Like, it felt like an unfolding instead of just we are adding to it. It's like, look, here is another layer to the mystery. And I was like, yes, good. That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
So,
and I was definitely surprised at the end. Although I was a little suspicious of who it ended up being, but then the big surprise.
They left like breadcrumbs, which was good. Yeah. Like, to the point where I was suspicious of one of the people who it ended up being, and the other one I read the name and I'm like, I should have known. I should have known that one. I really should have seen that coming. So that was fun. You could look back and see where they left the clues, which was nice.
Yeah.
And yes, I love both Darlington and Alex. They are both wonderful. I want to just wrap them in blankets and keep them safe forever, which isn't how these kind of books work, but I want to do it. I feel like Darlington and Alex are the ones playing with that idea that I mentioned of like the heroic fantasy versus the not, because Darlington is very much on team like magic is wonderful and beautiful, and like you meet him and he is very team that. Like, I've read the Raven Cycle, and to do that comparison, he feels like the Gansey. He feels like the rich kid who's like good with magic and is immersed in it. Or like if this had been a standard King Arthur book, he would have been the hero on the page. And then you have Alex, who's just like, hello, I am having a weird bad time.
Yeah, a really bad time. Yeah, but Darlington I liked because he wasn't just one layer rich kid who likes magic. He had issues from his childhood too that come up and
that they end up exploring later. Yeah. I feel like that's a good thing about Leigh Bardugo specifically. I feel like she always does that, which is really cool. Like, she'll be like, hello, here's a character archetype. And you're like, thank you for the character archetype. And she's like, I was kidding. There's 5 facets. Enjoy them all. And I'm like, all right. And it was a nice way for Darlington to kind of connect with Alex and that kind of stuff. Like, because at first he dismissed her and she dismissed him. And then later on in the book, they're both kind of like, oh, maybe too quick of a judgment there.
Yeah. He can't understand why seeing ghosts would be such a bad thing. And she's like, hold on a second. Let me tell you about it.
Let me explain. Yeah.
Which
I really liked, so it's not a spoiler because it's early, but I liked that first kind of bonding moment with them with the moths. I guess technically the moment where they kind of bonded was before that in the hallway, where like he had that moment of hesitation of like, I should not like I shouldn't push, I shouldn't ask these questions that I'm pushing. Like I should try to express some trust here. But the moment that was like magical bonding was she has tattoos that she's self-conscious about, and there are some magical moths that like take the ink away that he uses, which she's scared of butterflies. So that is a moment of trust on both sides.
Yeah, I did
I
like
thought
that.
that was sweet. I also really liked how the book sort of interacts with class, especially with Yale as a backdrop. Alex is not never expected to go to Yale, is not like a rich kid from a legacy background or anything like that, and is very much like she identifies very strongly with the first murdered victim for sure. And that's the initial catalyst to get her investigating. It's not she's like, this is the right thing to do, although kind of. She's like, that's what Darlington would say. But the reason she's investigating is because she recognizes the victim as a person when a lot of people around her are pressuring her to not view it that way.
And then I assumed a lot about the girl who was murdered, and it turns out like just what you find out about her is completely different than the stereotype that everyone assumes about her.
I kind of figured that would be the case because there's a detective in the book called Turner, and like, not gonna lie to you, like he showed up on screen and he said a thing, and I'm like, I don't believe a thing you say. And like, not spoilers, I won't say if that was accurate or not, but when he first showed up, I was like, look, I like you a lot as a person. However, anything you say, I'm going to believe the opposite. Continuing on. Okay. So the plot definitely presents this very one-dimensional portrait of the victim, and I'm like, no, that would be way too easy. Like, this cannot be who she was. I don't think this was who she is. And then it's like, we will make it even more complicated than you thought she was. And I'm like, okay, amazing. I'm here for this.
Yeah. It's good stuff. And Turner turned out to be
one of my favorite characters as well. So like,
he turns around halfway through, I think.
He does. Like, there was definitely a progression there. I liked Dawes. I really liked Dawes. If we're talking about characters we liked, I liked Dawes. Like, from the minute they introduced Dawes, they're like, look, it's the neurotic grad student. And I'm like, come here, let me hug you. Excellent. You are my favorite. Like, you are here in the library. You are exhausted. You want to go back to your research paper. You are my favorite. Come here, sit down. So I really enjoyed that.
I love their slow bond, too.
Because at first, Alex and Dawes do not get along at all. And like, I want you to bond. And then they did. And I'm like, thank you. Keep bonding. It was so good.
That was
good. So I enjoyed that a lot. And yeah, oh my gosh. I also like how the magic kept building on itself, kind of thing. You kind of already talked about this. But like, you start off with like, okay, we've got the butterflies on team. This is the shiny magic, and we've got the mean ghosts on team. This is the bad magic. But both sides expand. So, like you said, the bit that Alex can do with the ghosts when it comes around to the next murder, and then the portals and all the rest, like really investigating and expanding that idea of what magic looks like and what it can be in this world.
Yeah. I think that is one of the major themes, is that nothing was just one layer. It was all, look at all of this that I can put into one little category.
And yeah, I guess that kind of ties in with the houses a little bit. That they're all of the houses that Leth, is it Leth or Lethy? I never actually looked up how to pronounce it.
I don't know. In my head, it was Leth.
In my head, it was Leth. Okay, so Leth, like, you know, the Forgetful River Leth from Myth, that Leth. Anyway, they're helping out the other houses, and every time they go to visit one, it emphasizes how different it is, and I feel like that ties into the idea that magic isn't a monolith in this world, and that there's a lot of different aspects, and that no one fully understands it, even if they're claiming to fully understand it, and all of the rest. I feel like my one main dislike with the book was that it was a slow starter. I feel like that was like one hesitation. There was also it was hard to read about Alex's years in middle school, leading up to her leaving school. That was, I think, I know a lot of graphic and difficult stuff happens in the book, but a lot of it happens to adult Alex, so I'm like, it's okay, you can handle it. Like, you can't
Right,
really handle it, you need therapy, but also you can handle it. But like, I was not the bullying or the ghost magical things, like either side of it, or the how she ended up dealing with that by leaving school. I was not prepared for any of that from Alex. Like,
yeah.
it was hard for me to read about the middle school. How about you? Did you have any
Yeah.
spots where you hesitated in the book?
There was when her flashbacks to the middle school and up to when the multiple homicide happens, it was all really hard to read about because these people exist. It was so real. Not like she could, like people who can see ghosts, but just people who fall into that drug scene. And it's sad.
It reminded me a little bit of the Ellen Hopkins and Go Ask Alice and all those other genre of books about teens in really bad situations that I know I read when I was in high school, and a lot of other people also read, and just those kind of books where it was realistic and you knew it was happening somewhere, and then that was the part that hurt. Like, I can deal with nasty ghosties. That's fine. Like, I can't deal with like the knowledge that I'm just sitting there going, okay, this is happening to somebody somewhere, and I don't like this at all. So that bit was tough.
It's like when you read historical fiction and you know a lot of the really bad stuff actually did happen, and you're like, oh.
And you just have to like take a breath and walk away and like bury your face and scream for a minute and come back.
Yeah.
So
that part was tough.
Did you have any other big hesitations for the book?
No, I agree that it was a slow start.
You say you don't recommend the audiobook, and I think we both listened to bits of the audiobook. I only listened to it for the first 5 chapters. I know you listened to it for longer. Why didn't you love the audiobook?
I actually started listening to it a long time ago and stopped because I don't remember if it was the reader or I was just distracted or both, but I was like, what is happening? I have no, I'm going to stop.
That is fair. That is more than fair.
I needed to have the words in front of me to follow what was happening, especially in the beginning.
That makes sense. I think my biggest hesitation with the audiobook was the voices they did. Like, they make Turner sound like he's 40. That was weird. That was deeply weird. I just was like sitting there and I'm like listening to it, and then I got the book and I looked at the same passage and I'm like, no, that's not Turner's voice.
Yeah, sometimes readers don't get it right.
Like, Darlington sounded fine and Alex sounded fine, and then occasionally they'd read like somebody else's dialogue and I was over there like, no, who is that? That's not correct. But that's like classic audiobook problems where you're like, that's not the voice I heard in my head, only more so because I was like, I don't know what's happening. That was funny as far as it went. But yeah, I haven't seen a book that sort of deals, like, it's building its magic system, right? Like, this is a style of magic and ghost that doesn't really easily connect or slot into our pre-existing magic systems. And I think that's part of why I felt it was a slow starter, is because it's trying to acclimate me to this world of the magical Yale, which, as someone who has never been to anywhere with secret societies at all, I had 2 things to get used to. I'm like, okay, let's get used to the magic and let's get used to the Yale. And once I had both of those, we were good.
Yeah. I think she shouldn't have started off with such a big society meeting that she had to go to, because that's where I was like, what is happening? They're cutting somebody up? Why?
Yeah, that was rough. I think it would have probably been good if it had like skipped that and like started instead with like maybe a flashback to Alex's childhood or something, or maybe just skip directly ahead to the part where Darlington's like, hello, I have a new person who I have to show around magic school and I don't like her. And I would have been like, okay, I understand this. This is good.
If they explained a little bit more before that scene, it would have been better, I think.
Yeah, just a bit, like one more chapter of explanation would have kept me on board for what was happening there. Because at that point, I was still trying to figure out if Alex was there voluntarily or not. Like, I'm like, so you're cool with slicing people up? And then she's like, no, I'm
met Darlington yet.
Yeah, because we hadn't met Darlington yet. And then we meet Darlington, and then we figure out that Alex is there because it was a whole bargain on her hospital bed to like get her somewhere, and this is what she has to do as her job. And I'm like, okay, I am instantly more sympathetic to you now that I
Yeah.
know that you are not someone who just sits there for funsies and is like, so you know what sounds like a good idea today? Because I was not here for that. But Alex, once you actually get to know Alex, and Darlington, once you actually get to know Darlington, like they both do a really good job of being super sympathetic characters in a world where the magic doesn't necessarily always leave you wanting to be sympathetic.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah. So do you think there was too much of the dark content? Because I know a lot of it, we discussed all of the categories of things we might want to trigger warning for with this book. So.
I guess and no. I felt like it was needed to explain why Alex is the way she is, even though that was the toughest part to read. Maybe some of the violence later when she's investigating the murder could have been toned down a little, but
Yeah, I see that. I'm conflicted over the ghost when she's 12, in the bathroom.
yeah, that one was.
I understand why that ghost was there. Trigger warning for all people watching, that ghost assaults Alex at that time, which is what ends up prompting her to leave school. Like, I get it, but at the same time, like, every time I see a scene with something like that happen, I'm like, could we have picked something else to go in this spot besides this that would have still served the same purpose? Like, could a ghost have just attacked Alex normally and that would have led to the same result? And I kind of get like why, because that probably led her to let her guard down around some of the characters in her adolescence a little bit. Like, I don't feel like she would have been quite as comfortable with creepos if she hadn't dealt with ghost creepos. But at the same time, like, personal preference, would have liked to know. I do like the books that travel back and forth in time, though. Like, I love asynchronous books. I figured out that this book was going to be like doing the flashbacks and then the flash forwards and then the all over the place, and we're just giving you pieces of information at a time. And I'm over there like, ah, yes, thank you. This was what I wanted. So that's how I like to read books in the first place, and I've read a lot of those. But I don't know, did you enjoy the fact that it was kind of going back and forth in time?
It worked for this one. I don't always like it if it's poorly executed, but it worked for this one.
Yeah, I don't think you've read more Bardugo than I have. Does she do that in any of her other books? Because like it feels like she's chose that specifically for this format and this story, but I haven't read all of her stuff.
Doesn't. She might have a couple flashbacks, but it's not as much. She does more of a character switching, like each chapter is a different perspective, because she has more characters in her other books.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm used to the multiple perspectives, and this one plays with that less and with the time jumps more, but it made sense that she would go to different points in the narrative at different points. It fit the story she was telling really well.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts or final thoughts about the book before we go? Oh yes, important. There's a sequel. It's a cliffhanger.
Yes.
You need to know this. I didn't. You must know, because I read it and I was like, thank you for this. I suffer. Now I suffer. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a shattered heart.
The next one is, let me look up when the next one is coming out. Oops.
Yeah.
Sequel.
I was not expecting.
It doesn't even say.
It doesn't even say?
Because she has the next in the Grishaverse coming out this year.
She's in the middle of some stuff.
Yeah, so I think it's not even titled yet. It's just Alex Stern #2.
Okay, well, I get it, but also I don't get it, because how dare you leave me on this cliffhanger and make me suffer. But yes, eventually another book, and we will all have to wait very patiently to find out what happens with redacted spoiler. But looking forward to it. If you are interested in reading a spooky book and don't mind the fact that there will still be some unsolved spooks at the end, then, or not necessarily unsolved, but untackled spooks, because they have an idea of what's going on behind the spooks. They just got to do something about it.
Yeah.
So next month's book talk is Carnegie's Maid by Heather Terrell, and that's going to be historical fiction.
It is.
So,
it looks good.
It does look good. I'm intrigued.
Interesting.
So if you want to go ahead and get in on that book discussion, you should go and you should check that out on Hoopla. And then you will be all prepared and shiny for next month's discussion. So thank you for reviewing this book with me, Tess. This was exciting.
Yeah, thank you. It was really fun.
And thank all of you for tuning in and for sharing this fabulous book with us. And I hope you have lovely, non-spooky weekends filled with only the good kind of magic.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.